Anybody there?
All right, welcome back to this week's edition of So You Want to Be in IT. We're a podcast aimed at those starting their journey out in the vast world of IT. We talk about navigating the IT world as a beginner, right? So from how to break in, what to study for, climbing the ladder, management, office politics, and everything in between. So we are back for episode 15, I believe this is, Dean. The big
Yeah,
1-5.
15. The
I
big
think it's 15.
1-5. Yes.
We're treading down the road here, and we want to thank Dira Footman last week for her coming on and
Oh,
chatting.
what a great episode. Yeah, if you've not listened to that, go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah,
So insightful.
she was great. So we want to thank her for coming on and spending a few minutes with us and talking about her journeys and everything else. So, but this week we have another guest with us, and he's a close personal friend of mine, former coworker, and turned into a friend. We have Mr. Mike Kelly with us tonight. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
Hey, Mike.
Hey. Yeah.
We're well. We're good. How are you?
Every day above ground is a good one.
There you go. I like that. I got to use that.
Yeah.
Mike, you and I started, we had a relationship, we met each other, five or so years ago? Somewhere in there?
Give or take 5
Somewhere
years.
in there.
Yeah.
We both worked at a MSP together. I don't really want to mention names, so that's not really important, but we worked at a MSP together and we became close friends. And we've both moved on, obviously, from that MSP and found greener pastures and things of that nature. But Mike and you and I have stayed friends since that time. So, yeah, Mike, why don't you tell us what you're doing now? You are a contractor, right?
Considered a Microsoft vendor, right? That's my technical role, is Microsoft vendor. I work for another managed services provider now called JDA Technical Services Group. Our customers include Intuit, Apple, the National Football League, and Microsoft. And about 3 years ago, I was hired to be an Active Directory and Windows Server engineer for JDA, but I do work for Microsoft customers as the Microsoft provided subject matter expert. So I'm not a Microsoft FTE per se, but I do work for Microsoft customers.
Ah, cool. So you're doing like basically Active Directory, mainly on-prem, is that right?
It's mostly on-prem, some cloud-based stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So you've been there 3 years, yeah?
Yeah, a little more than 3 years
Okay.
now.
Cool. So as far as like the AD builds and stuff, you like building them, you tearing them down, you doing best practice?
Now, the 50% of my job is you and your company, you want to upgrade your Windows Server infrastructure from 2016 to 2019. You want someone like me on standby because you have your own Windows admins, your own Active Directory admins, but potentially you'll run into trouble. So you need like eyes and ears and virtual hands. So no, I don't do any building at all. I don't do any of the actual repairing if things break. But what you do is you call me and I'm like your escalation engineer.
Okay.
Or the other 50% of my time is I will teach workshops to IT professionals. Here's what's new in Windows Server 2022. And so that class can last for 1 day to 1 week, depending on the skill level of your in-house IT staff. Pre-COVID, I was traveling the country 100% of the time. I've taught classes in server management to the IT staff at Union Pacific Railroad and a number of other Fortune 100 companies. I've done network analysis for the McDonald's Corporation in Brazil. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Brazil. I had to do that one remotely, but that would have been a trip I would have loved to have taken. And twice since COVID started, I've been out to Los Angeles to do work for an international bank who shall remain nameless.
Nice. Look at that. Yeah, I know you like to travel. That's one of your things. And your kids live all over. So the closer you get to your kids, that's always good too.
Yeah. My daughter lives in Salt Lake. My oldest son now lives down in Philly. My youngest son is still at Fort Bragg. He's in the Army yet for one more year.
Cool. Right on.
Nice. Okay. So, yeah, at least you get to spread your wings a little.
Yeah, I've earned a couple of 100,000 frequent flyer miles. Let's put it that way.
There you go.
Very nice.
You get some first class in there or what? You flying coach? What are you doing?
I'm flying coach mostly, trying to save up those points for when I want to take like personal trips.
There you go. I like it. So then, Mike, backtrack a little bit. So I know you've been in the game a long time. Where did you get your start, and how did you come about this computer thing? And then, what sort of fields have you worked in? What have you touched? And that sort of led you to your job now.
All right. Well, I'll be 55 years old in March, but I got my start when I was
Look
13
at
years
that.
old. My parents bought me a Commodore 64 for Christmas or my birthday that year. I don't remember
Nice.
which. And I had a paper route. So I would deliver newspapers and I would collect money, and the tips I had, I got to keep as my pay. So I bought all these books on basic programming, and I taught myself how to program in BASIC before I was in 10th grade. And I knew at an early age, this is what I wanted to do for a living. So I went to a business school to learn programming, took classes in BASIC, RPG, COBOL, some Pascal, Fortran, some assembler. Didn't like the programming part, but networking back then it wasn't nearly what it is today. So I graduated from that school with an associate's degree, just worked some various BS jobs, got a job as a temp on a customer service help desk for a large company in Clearwater, Florida. It was a temp to hire role. I worked for 2 years on their customer support help desk. I hated every minute of it. I hate being tethered to a desk. I hate being on the phone all day. I want to get my hands dirty. I want to build things and fix things when they break. Plus, if you've worked on a help desk, you spend a lot of time getting yelled at for things that aren't your fault. And you just have to, I'm sorry you're having this issue. My job is to help you fix it. You have to internalize all that. So one of my senior guys took an interest in me, and he was telling me about getting certified. So he introduced me to the CompTIA A plus certification back in the 1990s. I don't even remember what year. He said, get this. This is your foot in the door. You'll become a PC technician. So I did that, got my A plus in 98. So I'm so old and took that test so long ago that even though it expires now every 3 years, I'm grandfathered in. So I'm still A plus certified, even though it's been 25 years, give or take.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. We're like that for the
Ah,
CCMB
Okay.
too,
I love it.
because we're grandfathered in.
Nice. Nice.
We always have that too. So yeah, it's a beautiful feeling being old and just like, yeah, I was doing this from the day, from early.
Yeah. Now, I honestly, sometimes I wonder if I had to take the A plus as it's written today, would I pass it? And the answer is probably no.
What was the flavor of the exam back then? What
It
was it?
was Microsoft DOS and Windows version
Ooh.
3. Yep. So
Oh,
I remember being asked 6 consecutive questions, and I remember this specifically because I got 3 of them wrong. The DOS commands to work with your dial-up modem, the AZ commands, how do you initialize the modem? How do you dial a number? How do you disconnect? There was 6 questions in a row, and I was like, I didn't study for any of these, and I got 3 of them wrong because on your score sheet at the end, it tells you which categories you did well in, and the modem initialization stuff I did poorly in. But so no plug and play to speak of. How do you install a device driver? Well, you have to find the right floppy diskette, make sure that it's disk one of one, or you have to find both diskettes and that kind of stuff. So it's been a while since I've done that kind of work. But so doing PC tech work for them, we use Novell NetWare servers, version 312. And I was like, okay, I could get into making user accounts, and I used to reset passwords, but I didn't do any of the actual server work. So Kit, who was the gentleman who told me about A plus, he's like, you get certified in Novell too. Oh, you can. And that was my introduction to server administration. So in 1999, I got my first Novell NetWare certification, tried for my CNE, my certified Novell engineer, came up one exam short. And then as Microsoft NT 3.5 into 4.0, they started, to take over. So I transitioned over to Windows and got an MCSE in the NT track, tried for the MCSE in the 2000 track, but didn't complete all those exams. And I've been focused on Windows servers and Active Directory ever since. So yeah, I've
nice.
done every job in IT with the exception of developer slash programmer. I've worked on the help desk. I've been a director, and I've done like every kind of job in between. I learned early in my management career that managing people is not really something I'm good at. I'm a good break fix guy. I'm a good idea guy, but writing up performance evaluations for you two, not something I'm good at. Having to pull one of you into the office because you were 3 minutes late because that's what the policy says I have to do, not something I'm good at. Plus, I don't have the right temperament to manage people. I think I fell into a trap where I expected everybody to come to work early like I did and work late like I did and get certifications like I did. And not everybody wants to do that. It's not fair for you to treat your employees like that. So I quickly got out of management. Like I think I lasted a total of 3 years and finally said, enough is enough. Let me go back to doing work for a living. Oh,
Brutal.
yeah. Well,
Dropping the hammer. I love it.
I, I tell you, the one thing I did learn that a positive I took away from it, though, I've had so many bad managers in my career that I learned so many of the things that I would say, if I ever become a manager, I'm not going to do this or I'm going to do that, but better. And I found out the hard way that oftentimes you're limited by budget, you're limited by policy, right? You have to do certain things if you want to keep yourself from getting terminated. And lastly, most recently, my company, JDA, because I'm a Microsoft vendor, Microsoft has implemented what we call the 18-6 rule. I could only work as a customer engineer for 18 consecutive months from the time that they implemented the rule, which was last May. So my last day as an engineer for JDA was at the beginning of November. I recently transitioned over to becoming a technical recruiter for them. So now I'm trying to find technical experts to work for my company doing vendor work for Microsoft.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're there, what, like 5 weeks, something like that?
5 weeks as a
So
recruiter now. Yeah.
you liking it
It's
so far, or is it you have a different set of challenges? I would imagine.
I actually love it. I love talking to people, whether it's on the phone or in person. Pat, once you get me talking, I can just talk nonstop. And the only time you get a word in edgewise is when I stop to take a breath. So it's right up my alley. Right. I love talking to people. I love asking, hey, tell me about your background. Tell me why you think you'd be a good fit for this position. The challenges I'm facing are I can find an unlimited number of people. For example, I'm looking for an expert level SQL database engineer. There's no shortage of people who know SQL, but not to the level that Microsoft is expecting. So my trick is, and I call this looking for hay in the needle stack. I think that's a line I borrowed from SpongeBob
There you go.
SquarePants because my kids used to watch that when they were younger. So yeah,
For
I'm
sure.
looking for a diamond in the rough, right? I'm looking for someone who has 5 to 10 years of SQL experience, someone who can pass a technical interview given by some of the most intelligent people at Microsoft. And that's a hard thing to do, right? Because I can find SQL people, but once you start getting into the minutia, it's wow, there's so much more to this program than I've been working in IT for 29 years. I can spell SQL, but as I'm reading through the documentation of how to do this or how to set up that or disaster recovery and high availability failover, it's oh, good grief. There's a whole series of certifications you can get just for databases.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot. I'm having a good time with it. But like I said, finding the right people has been challenging.
So what do you do to find those people or those diamonds in the rough? You got some tricks of the trade, or you got like some series of exams, or is it a series of questions you ask on the phone?
Well, I browse LinkedIn all day, and my boss has written a custom query that we use on Dice, looking for people with SQL, looking for a minimum number of years of experience, looking for specific version numbers. Well, you guys are doing Python now for Cisco automation and things like that. So think of the most complex script you've ever written in Python. It's very similar to that. But that helps me to not have to, do I just type in SQL engineer and then go through the 27,000 resumes I'm going to find? My tricks, I have a list of questions that I ask. And because I'm not a SQL engineer and my job is to determine whether you're going to be able to pass the technical interview, not give you the technical interview, I always ask you, explain this concept to me like I'm 10 years old. So tell me about
Okay.
SQL always on availability groups, but don't use technical jargon with me because I'm not a SQL guy. Explain it to me like I'm 10 years old. One of the better gauges, in my opinion, of whether you can teach people or not is can you take complex material and teach it to me in a way that I can understand, even though I'm not an expert in what you do? So that's a big part of what I'm looking for. How do you present yourself to people? Do you talk too quickly, too slowly? Do you get frustrated when you don't know the answer to a question? Those are kind of red flags for me. But my job really is kind of the gatekeeper. Like I'm the person separating you from the technical folks. And yet you have to kind of get through me first. It's not that difficult to impress me. Really, it isn't. Are you articulate? Are you answering the questions I'm asking you? Would I feel comfortable putting you in front of a Microsoft customer? Some of these Fortune 100 companies, They have their own teams of experts, and they're running into issues that their experts can't fix. Your job is to be the expert that helps their experts increase their knowledge, right? So I'm trying to get a 50,000-foot overview of your experience, your skills, and more importantly, your personality, right? Can I put you in front of customers and you're going to do the job correctly?
Okay, that's huge. Okay, that's really
Yeah,
insightful.
so Mike, talk about that a little more as far as getting the right people in the room and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward via the people that you put forward, right? I would assume you have a good look at or a good feel for people when you interview them because you've been on the technical side as well. So I feel like you you have the best of both worlds and you have a perspective on both sides. So you can see the guys that know what they're doing versus the guys that look good on paper, if that makes sense.
Yes, and in fact, I see a lot of this as far as like the tech stuff. I'm looking for the number of years you've been a SQL DBA for this specific role. I'm looking at your certifications. I'm looking at where you went to school, how long you went to school, what kind of degrees you had, what's the most recent certification exam you've taken, because to me, that's a big deal. Because even I'll be 55 in March. I'm studying for an Azure exam. I'm taking it less than 2 weeks. And when I pass that one, I have the next one slated to go off 6 weeks after that. So to me, no matter what your age is or your background, are you still continuing to learn new things? That's super important to me. Now, from the tech perspective, I'm not asking you technical questions during my part of the interview, but I do know enough to know if you're trying to pull the wool over my
Yeah,
eyes. I might not be a SQL expert, but if you tell me you can build a Windows failover cluster for SQL using one server,
right.
I'm going to know that you're not
That's a
being
red
truthful
flag.
with
Yeah.
me.
Now that makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting that you have both sides of the coin and you can see through some of that. And I think Dean, you and I talk about this all the time on the show. And Mike's going to be 55 this year, and he's still learning. If you don't like continuing education, at least staying current with things, and maybe not even a certification, but just reading the white paper and staying current with today's technology, IT is just not for you because it never stops.
Yeah, for sure. You have to keep grinding and keep learning and however means it's possible. Certifications are huge for that. But if that's not your flavor, then yeah, just delving in, getting involved in projects because knowledge is knowledge at the end of the day. And people are going to ask you specific questions, like you said, to help your experts out. So it's really important to keep on your education by any means possible.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's just the way the world is, right? We just keep moving forward. And I've said this before, and there is no standing still in this field. You're either looking ahead at the next rung of the ladder or the next carrot, whatever you want to call it, your next goal, or you're falling behind. IT moves way too quickly for people to just stand around and try to coast, if you will.
Yeah, you usually got about 3 to 5 years before you have to
Yep.
start picking something up
Yep.
again. But yeah, I agree. You have to start get that textbook out, get that video out, or start doing some interesting project. Otherwise, yeah, you're gonna get left
Yeah.
behind.
Case in point, yeah, I've started studying for the CCMP security. Right.
yeah, good
Congrats.
luck with that.
It's an interesting take, and just this afternoon, I made. We talked a few episodes back about tools and different apps that we use to study and this and that. I created a mind map, so now I have all the major core topics in the security exam, and then broke them down into a mind map. So now I get a visual of what I need to get my head around and things of that nature. So just putting the practice to work here. We're using what we're preaching, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
like that a lot. So, Mike, you said something interesting about scheduling your exams like 6 weeks out. Can you talk a bit about that? Because that was really interesting. I would like to learn a little bit of your thought pattern about
Okay,
that.
well, like I was late to the Azure party. I've only been working with Azure for about 3 years now, but I recently became a Microsoft certified trainer. And one of the benefits is I can schedule my cert exams and they're significantly discounted. So I looked on the search page. AZ303 is the one that I'm studying for currently. That's the first half of the certified solutions architect. And that would mean if I get that, I have to pass the two exams, 303 and 304. At least on paper, I'll be qualified to design your Azure architecture if you're starting from scratch. I'm of the mindset I schedule the test, I pay for the test, and then it's up to me to say, hey, you just paid money for this. you had better study. Because early on, my mindset was I'll study now and I'll schedule the test when I'm ready. But then I would procrastinate. And maybe instead of in 6 weeks, I'd push it off for 6 months. Well, I scheduled the 303 exam 2 weeks ago. I'm taking it Monday the 13th. And then I was like, oh goodness, I only have 4 weeks to get ready. I went out and I got some practice tests. I subscribed to Scott Duffy's Udemy course. I love Scott Duffy's training, so shout out to Scott. He's an excellent Azure trainer. And then Pat, I didn't develop a mind map, but what I am doing is keeping track of my progress in the videos and the practice labs. I'm 60% of the way towards my scheduled exam date. I had better be at least 70% of the way through my materials. So I keep track of my progress, as it were. So I guess, Dean, to answer your direct question, I'll schedule the test today for 4 to 6 weeks away. And then that forces me to either study, or I might as well just be handing you that money and say, thanks for
Right.
coming. Here's,
You're gonna
free
eat that
money.
money, right? Yeah.
I like that. I like that concept though, because it forces you to keep on top of your studies.
There.
Sometimes I'm a bit like you in the respect of you can procrastinate, delay it. I'll get to it eventually, and then you just don't schedule it.
Right.
And yeah, when you schedule something, it actually makes it real when tangible, when like you're more committed to actually get through the material and actually pass that test. So
Yeah,
yeah,
there's a bit of
I really
urgency
like that.
there. You eventually
Yeah,
run out of road. That date, the road
mm,
stops. So you have to be
yeah,
slowed down and come to a stop at that particular time.
And, and on a personal level, I'm notoriously cheap. I would be mad if I wasted that money. If I paid to take the exam and then I went there unprepared, because I'm going to fail it if I'm
Yep.
unprepared. And then the whole drive home, because I still take my tests in person, the whole drive home, I'm kicking myself in the behind. I could have spent that money on something else,
yeah.
and then I beat myself up over it.
Yeah, I personally just don't like feeling uncomfortable with questions I don't know the answer to. It enrages me personally. I'm like, how do I not know that? I'm better than that.
Dean gets home, he's throwing stuff around the room. How could I not know that?
Yeah, precisely. But yeah, I definitely get your way of thinking on that for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Like I said, I just started the CCMP, and I'm trying to figure out how to like logically lay that out as far as okay, where am I at with videos? What am I studying today? What do I have to cover yet? Because I personally have an INE.com subscription, and I'm going through the CCMP. They have a learning path that I'm going through, and it's 264 hours worth of video content.
Oof.
I believe they give you a lab as well, a security lab in that. So I have a couple tokens that I can burn on some virtual labs and stuff that I'd like to do. So yeah, but I'm always looking for ways to like organize this information and keep things straight in my head and things of that nature. So if anybody's got any tips out there, let me know. I'm always looking to do things better. So we'll see what comes of that.
That's a lot of video content to get
It
through.
is.
And then what your stuff you're not comfortable with already, you're watching that video twice, maybe three
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. If you're really, yeah, if you're kind of like, oh, what did he say? Or it doesn't really compute, no pun intended. Yeah. You're watching it 2, 3 times or at least parts of videos multiple times. So yeah, I'm curious to see what's up here. So I'll be getting into that in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, work is sending me to a Palo Alto boot camp next week. Monday I start. It's virtual. So I got a week through that. And then after that, really starting to hit the NP security. And shout out to first of all, shout out to my company for putting me through a boot camp. That was really that's awesome. And then secondly, I found out today when I got more info that I get a voucher for the Palo Alto cert at the end of the course. So I could basically
Nice.
go and take the test anywhere in the next year. I could take one of the Palo certs and maybe get myself some Palo stuff. So looking forward to that as well.
So now, Pat, if I can give you some words of advice, and of course, this is going to be dependent upon your comfort level. If you get enough information during the boot camp to pass the cert, take the cert as soon as you can
Yep.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Because especially with boot camp stuff, if you've ever worked with someone who's gone through a boot camp and that's how they get certified, unless you're actively using it all the time, you memorize the stuff in the boot camp, you take the test, and then if you're not using it daily, because you learned it quickly, you're going to forget it
Correct.
quickly, but you're using it every day. My suggestion would be take it as soon as you can after the boot camp is
Yeah, I
over.
think even in the documentation that I read that they suggest within the first 90 days. taking that exam just because it's fresh and you're coming off that boot camp nice and hot and go and take it in Pearson View and go through the whole thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to A, the boot camp, and then B, cracking that at the Palo cert, see if I can add those letters behind my name. So that's gonna be cool. Yeah, it's gonna be cool.
Happy
So
day.
did you have anything else? Any thoughts?
No, nothing really. Only thing last thing I had was how did you get from sort of doing Active Directory into the sort of Azure world? Like, was that sort of like peer pressure from colleague, or could you see where the nature of Microsoft going, and you just wanted to still be a part of that arena? What was your thought process there?
Well, my thought process started one way and then it quickly U-turned. At this previous position that Pat and I worked together at, I went into that role thinking, all right, this is the job I'm going to retire from. I'm going to
Okay.
I know what I know. I'm getting too old. IT moves too quickly. That lasted for about 3 years. And I finally said, I can't stay static. Right. Even if I wanted to go somewhere else now, I couldn't because things are so far ahead of me. And that's why I was late to the Azure party because at this previous company, everything was on prem at every
Ugh.
company. And so I was looking at the Microsoft documentation, I was looking at the Microsoft certification path, and oh, I could take all these fundamentals exams for Azure, for data processing, for machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And so that kind of rekindled. There was a calendar year where I took a certification a month the whole year back in the early 2000s.
Wow,
And so
nice.
I kind of fell off that cliff. Okay, I know what I know. And now I'm that angry old guy waving his 300 baud modem around. You kids get off of my lawn.
Ah,
And then I was like, oh, there's a whole world out here yet. And I'm not ready to be taken behind the woodshed. I'm not ready to retire yet. So I started studying for the Azure Fundamentals exam, applied for my current role, well, my customer engineer role, thinking there's no way in the world I'm going to get hired. Then they did hire me, and I was like, oh goodness, I met people within the first month I was there, half my age, who knew twice as much. But rather than letting that intimidate me, I was like, this is awesome. I can lean on your expertise. Who cares that you're half my age? If you're smarter than I am, teach me. When you give talks, I'm going to come, I'm going to listen, I'm going to ask questions. And then that little fire that got lit under me when I was studying for the Azure Fundamentals exam kind of got rekindled. So I took that. I took the artificial intelligence and the machine learning exam. Then I took Azure, the administration exam, AZ 104. And that's what qualified me for my Microsoft certified trainer. And then I was like, if I want to keep that next year, I had better keep going. So here I am studying for 303 and then 304 will be after that. But yeah, I was super gung ho about certs. And just because I wanted to keep learning. And then I was like, "Eh," and I fell off that cliff. And now I'm back on the upward swing. I move a little bit slower now because I'm older. Slow and steady wins the race.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more
yeah,
there.
no, it's a good story. Yeah, it's very hard to, and Mike, you and I know this firsthand, and maybe Dean, you have some experience with this as well, but it's very hard to study for new certs and things that are current if your day-to-day job does not do any of those things. That's a very hard,
Oh yeah,
like, it's tough. That's a
totally.
hard switch to flip, right? So if you're working with on-prem
Yeah,
every day and rebuilding Windows 2003 servers for some customer, whatever, and then you go home and you're like, "Oh, let's play in the Azure world." You're like, "Holy Jesus, this is completely night and day."
yeah. I agree with that totally. Yeah, there's some topics on the sort of MP security and CCI security. I'm just like, we don't do this at
Yeah,
work. And I'm just like,
right.
but you have to know it anyway. And I'm just like, it's annoying, but it's just part of the parcel. They might introduce it finally at work or projects that may, but yeah, to get to that sort of level of, or that prerequisite of the level of technology, you need to know to pass the exam. And then your workplace doesn't allow for that kind of experience to, I don't know, relish you in that
Yeah.
experience is really difficult. Like you said, it's night and day, and it's like
You're
basically
right.
having two
Yeah, you're
different
right.
jobs.
I was doing that for a while, and it just you eventually burn out on that, right? Because you go to work and you want to do well, because that's the going to work and your job is the one that actually quote unquote matters, right? It pays you, it keeps food on the table, sort of thing. And then you're coming home and you're like,
Absolutely.
all
Yeah.
right, well, now I got to ramp up, and your brain has to go in like warp speed. And you're like, you can only do that for so long. I mean, I burned out. I mean, maybe people are like that, they can do that, but I burned out and I had to put it down because I wasn't doing anything like that especially at the job Mike and I worked at. We were so slow, we were almost going backwards. So it was, and then you go home and you're like, you're trying to better yourself. Like your head is in the right space, but then what you're actually learning, I couldn't do it. It just didn't work because
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't
no, it
simulate.
doesn't.
I
It's
say,
tough.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
tough gig.
Plus, you
yeah.
put in a 8 to 10 hour
Yeah.
workday, and now you're going to come home and put in what 2 to 4 more hours of
Yeah.
studying. Like, at what point do you switch your brain
Yeah.
off and do something fun?
Yeah, it's never. Never is the right answer there. Yes.
This is life.
Welcome to
Yeah,
IT.
pretty much. So, Mike, for the newbies listening out there, whether they're trying to break in or they're ready to leave college, or even some folks that are in high school trying to pick that major, right, or trying to pick the right college for them, or whatever path they want to go, do you have any sort of advice to start at the building block of IT, some sort of help desk or some sort of mindset to say, okay, look, I want to learn and climb the ladder, but I don't want to go too fast because then that's going to burn out, and then you're sort of just floating out there in space, and IT just isn't fun anymore, and they're looking for something else 3 years down the road.
Yeah, I guess what I would say, because one of my part-time jobs, I teach as an adjunct at Lehigh Carbon Community College in the networking department as well. Figure out, at least generally, where do you want to be? Do you want to do networking? Do you want to do virtualization? Do you want to do cloud stuff, whether it's Azure, AWS, or GCP stuff? Not specifically, but more generally. Then I told my kids to do this as well. Get on Dice, get on Indeed, get on LinkedIn, search for jobs in that specific major. Where are the jobs? How much do they pay? Now, me starting at the help desk and then doing Windows client support and then Windows server support and a little bit of networking in there. My first bit of advice to people wanting to follow that path, you can't go wrong with A plus. A plus is a minimum requirement for many companies to do level 1 support. You can't go wrong with it. Take that, and then that's a cert you have. You'll carry that with you no matter where your employer is. And then if you want to get into networking, look at Net Plus, maybe the CCNA, although the CCNA has been an exam that has intimidated me for more than a decade. I've started and stopped that certification more times. I don't have enough fingers to count.
Still the hardest Cisco exam I've taken, by the way.
CCNA,
Yeah.
no kidding.
Yeah, it still is.
It was.
For me, it's still the
Well,
hardest.
well,
Yeah, because the ramp up's just
Well, Pat
insane.
and I were talking about that recently, and I don't know if it's the current version, but the version, Pat, that we were going through months ago, the books by Wendell Odom, more than 2,000 pages of material. This is supposed to be an associate level exam. I looked at that, went, no, no thanks. But like for young people getting started, take a look at your community colleges, right? You can go to Kutztown or Penn State. You can major in computer science, but at your community colleges like Northampton and L-Tri-C, you can take classes on CCNA. You can take the Net Plus or A Plus prep. We have classes on Windows Server 2016, soon to be 2019, and I just recently finished designing their first Azure class. It's a combination of AZ 900, the fundamentals exam, and the 104 admin exam. You don't even have to register as a full-time student there. Just sign up for that one class,
Yeah.
right? And whatever
Nice.
L-Tri-C or NACAC charges for one class, take that class. Now, the CCNA class we have, I think, is divided up over 2 semesters, so you have to take 2 classes, but if you want to branch out into, say, server work, Hyper-V is free. If you have a Windows computer or laptop that has 16 gigs or more of memory, get yourself a cheap 1 or 2 terabyte USB drive, build yourself a virtual lab. Whether it's VMware, whether it's Hyper-V, VMware offers ESX for free,
Yeah.
right? If
Sure.
you have access to old hardware and you want to practice virtualization, there's no better way to get started. Download the free software. If you want to do ESX, get on eBay and buy yourself a $300 server. It doesn't have to be a Lamborghini, but once you decide you want to do networking or you want to do virtualization or you want to do cloud, look at the jobs. Where are they at? How much do they pay? Look for the certifications in that area. Look at your local community colleges or business schools to see if they offer courses in that if you don't want to study for it by yourself. And my last bit of advice is get ready to study by yourself.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to
Yeah.
IT.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's team and by yourself kind of game. It switches like that too.
Yep.
It's very fast paced.
Yes.
Yeah. It is. Because Mike, you and I we had a Discord server a few months back, maybe a year or so now, that we met every Thursday night to study for our CCNA. And Dean, you even came for a week or two there, and it just fizzled.
Yeah,
Like a bunch of people joined the Discord, and I tried to keep it
yeah,
going and with different what we were following and things of that nature. And we had the same like 5 or 6 guys join every week. It was never anything like nobody else joined. It never really grew anywhere, and it just fizzled out. But yeah, I would echo Mike's statement as far as getting that lab together. Case in point, I'm waiting for a cheapy laptop that I'm getting secondhand from a family member,
you go.
and my 2 terabyte drive just showed up today. So I'm building that lab next week when I get that laptop. So I'm still learning, still doing that. I know VMware just enough to be dangerous, nothing too crazy, but I can at least get it off the ground. But like I said, Hyper-V is free, ESX is free, and join those communities. Right? We had Deer on last week, and she said, man, she goes, if the communities that were available now were available when, guys like on this podcast were starting, we'd be experts by now. There's so much content out there. It is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's not just the content. It's like the software's
Yep.
come down in price too. Like ESXi
No.
wasn't free back in the day. Hyper-V, I'm not sure about Hyper-V if it was free or not. I don't know if it was even available.
Well, now if you have Windows as your operating system, you can install the Hyper-V role on it. Now, setting up a host
Okay,
as a Hyper-V host, I think you pay licensing for that. But if you have a
okay,
Windows 10 VM, you just install the Hyper-V role, and that doesn't cost you anything, except the overhead of running Windows 10. And now you're running virtual machines on top of that. So that's why I said you want at least 16 gigs of RAM.
okay. And you don't need like a Windows Pro or Enterprise version. You can just do it with a standard Home
Ooh,
Edition.
that I don't know. It may
Yeah,
require
because
Pro.
Pro, yeah, I figured it might require a Pro or like an Enterprise Edition.
Uh,
Yeah, normally it does for like
Yeah.
Microsoft products. You can't even turn BitLocker on without Windows Pro. So
yeah, I can't RDP into your machine if it's Windows Home, which makes troubleshooting issues
yes,
remotely for friends and
Hard.
family
yeah,
members
Yeah.
difficult.
It's hard. Yeah. The
so
other
yeah,
flavor that's
yeah.
come on in the last couple of years is Proxmox. Have you guys heard of that at all? I think Proxmox is open source, if I'm not mistaken. If you guys want to look into that,
Maybe right.
Jeremy
Yeah,
Chara from CBT Nuggets fame has his own YouTube channel. He does a video on how to spin up Proxmox, and it seems pretty straightforward. So if you're looking for a little bit more outside the Hyper-V and or ESXi world, check out Proxmox and check out Jeremy's YouTube channel doing that. But all that stuff is available. It's literally at your fingertips. And Mike, that's another good point too with the LinkedIn. Start one early, right? Even if you're a junior in college or sophomore or whatever, start that, man, because there's so many opportunities out there just to network with people. But just hey, like you said, Mike, hey, call me next year and we'll talk, or
Yeah,
internships. So LinkedIn has some decent internships out there now, and even though you can't work full time, you can still get your foot in the door in an internship. And the only way you do that, or I should say, it makes it easier to do that, is to sign up with LinkedIn, get to know people, get to know people in your space and some of the major
yeah,
players, and get them on your good side. And the more you interact with them, the more they see your name and the more familiar you become. And hey, I got a spot open for XYZ. Oh, you know what? I got a guy on LinkedIn that we've talked a few times, and he's pretty active on my, likes my stuff and blah blah blah. Maybe he would like it, that sort of thing. So there's just so much out there that there's a wealth of it, and if you're not taking advantage of it, it's your own fault at this point, because it's screaming to be taken advantage of.
it's like leaving money on the table, right?
Yeah.
LinkedIn, I belong to, I want to say 200 different groups between Active Directory and SQL and at Cisco networking, et cetera, some VMware groups. And oftentimes I'll just look at what the groups say. Oh, okay, here's a new release from VMware. Let me read up on this white paper. It's a great place to just go, even if you're not actively participating, just to kind of shoulder surf and see what's going on.
yeah. I shoulder surf and look at the comment section. It's really, you get so much insight and information of what's trending and what's going on in these organizations. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. It's pretty cool. And having a LinkedIn profile gives you so much exposure to just the world in your field, not in your field, people trying to get in your field, people trying to reach out and get tips or get more insight into what you're doing or collaborate. It's actually really phenomenal. So yeah, really good shout out to LinkedIn, and thank God Microsoft has like completely destroyed it yet. Let's put it
That's coming.
True.
Don't count them chickens before they hatch. That's coming, boy.
Oh,
well, they've had it for a while, and it's so far so good. Remember when they got Skype and it just like Skype didn't
And now
work?
Skype is not even a thing. Yeah, it's not even a thing.
yeah. Now, I can tell you as a new recruiter, the first thing I do if you apply for a position with us, I look at your resume. The second thing I do is copy and paste your name into my LinkedIn search engine. I'm looking for that profile. Right. I'm not so concerned about Facebook, at least initially. I will look at Facebook if you make it past like the first 2 rounds, because I want to make sure I'm not passing on someone who we probably all have Facebook accounts. And some of the comments on Facebook are slightly less professional than those comments on LinkedIn. So I want to make sure I'm not passing someone along who's may not be a good
Wild.
fit.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Why? Yes. I like that. Thank you.
Wild.
That's the most professional way to say that. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
I totally hear you. Yeah. So what would you go by, the LinkedIn or the Facebook? If it was like, always go by the Facebook.
I always go by LinkedIn first. I don't waste any time looking for you on Facebook unless we get to a point where you're getting ready for the technical interview. Now I have to make sure that you're on the straight and narrow, because what I don't want is my manager coming back to me saying, "Hey, someone at Microsoft called and said, 'Hey, why are you interviewing Pat? Have you looked at his Facebook page?'" Why, no, I haven't. That's the wrong answer to give to your boss. And I'll tell you, to be quite honest, and maybe this isn't fair of me, but it's just the way that I roll in this space. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile in 2021, I'm going to give your resume much less weight from a significance perspective. How can you be applying for a technical position and not be part of LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Right? How can I verify who you are as far as like your jobs? Because I could put that I'm the president of IBM on my resume.
Right.
And if I don't have a LinkedIn account or some other professional organization account that you can look at to
verify that.
verify, hey, was he really the president of
Right.
IBM? Which is funny because I've seen people, like I said, the Texas Department of Corrections, quite a few resumes coming through. So I looked at the Texas Department of Corrections on LinkedIn, and it's now they're big, but they don't have a need for 100 different SQL DBAs. So something's not right here.
Yeah, you got to look at those testimonies for sure, and LinkedIn's great for that. Recommendations, testimonies on projects you worked on. Yeah, if you don't really have that, then like you said, you can just fabricate your whole resume, and it doesn't hold the same weight because there's nothing to really back it to. And why wouldn't you want that in, like you said, in 2021? For a technical job, why wouldn't you want that exposure for any job, really, to be honest? It's a good place. It's a good landing point to show off and expose yourself of your achievements. And then it's a great place for people to view those achievements.
Now, would the two of you agree with this statement? Now, it's all anecdotal. I don't know if this is true, but I believe today, especially, you have the potential to entertain more job opportunities through networking via a place like LinkedIn than you do by just blindly sending resumes. Would you agree that's accurate?
Yeah, I would. I think LinkedIn's become
For sure.
the premier place to basically do that, to network and to rub elbows with people you normally wouldn't if you were just blindly. And I'm not knocking sites like Indeed or Monster or Dice or anything like that. You really don't know what you're applying to, and I feel with Indeed you can actually see people that actually work there via whatever company you're applying to. It's get a little bit of background before you go throwing your resume in there, and like places like Indeed and Monster and Dice, you don't necessarily have that. You're just applying to a job at its face value.
Yeah, it's a wild card for sure. You're throwing your resume out there. Maybe it'll land, maybe it won't. But yeah. LinkedIn's a more of a personal touch. You might send like a professional courtesy email or just to introduce yourself, that kind of thing. And then your resume, it's more personal. You can see what people you have in common. Whereas, those other sites and places you said, they don't really have those kind of functions or facilities for users to do that. So it's
I
less
agree.
organic, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then shifting that or talking about that, I wanted to cover, and Mike, I think you're in a nice position to talk about this as well. In the IT, there's a massive IT tech shortage going on right now due to various things. I think it's various things, but I'm curious to get your take on why there is a mass shortage, and are we at the top of the shortage? Are we on the downside of it? Are those roles being filled? Like, what's driving the IT tech shortage, and how are we going to get out of the hole, if you will? And from your recruitment perspective, I'd be curious to see what you think about that.
Well, obviously it's a complex
Yeah,
problem, so the complete answer is going to
super
be
complex.
complex.
Yeah.
But I think if something positive has come from COVID, it should be the fact that we as IT people should have been able to prove I can be at least as productive working remotely as I can in the office. I would argue you could be more productive. Say that you have a 1 hour commute. You're spending 2 hours a day in the car, and I call that unproductive time. Now, for the last 20 months or so, most of us have been working from home. Now, some companies are starting to require people to come into the office, believe it or not, 5 days a
Oof,
week. And it's
what's the
why.
point of that? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I guess there are multiple possible answers to that question. And I could speculate on a couple, but then this will take a downward turn really quickly. So let's not go that way. There are plenty of people out there with tech backgrounds, but I think part of the problem is if you stay at one job too long, you only know how to do things the way that you learned at that job. And other companies may want you to do XYZ instead of ABC. Other folks, they get a job and they stop learning new things. I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the number of people who call themselves SQL DBAs that can't speak intelligently on backup and recovery of databases. I'm certainly not going to pass you along to a technical screening if you can't tell me how to back up a SQL database. So it seems like there's an abundance of people with skill levels between beginner to lower intermediate. There's not as many people looking to job hop, at least in my experience, for the higher intermediates to advanced people. Plus, let's face it, with so many people out of work and so many companies desperate to hire people, employees or potential employees may have more bargaining power now. Maybe I'm asking for 3 weeks of vacation to start instead of two. And your company may, we've always done it this way. You've always gotten 2 weeks and you're not willing to be flexible. You're going to have a hard time finding people. If I've been working from home, like most of us for the last 2 years, if I got a job offer that I thought was great, the greatest job offer ever, oh, but you have to be in the office 5 days a week, I'm going to turn that job
In a
down flat.
heartbeat.
Yeah, so that job may stay open for weeks, if not months. Also, right, because the job market being what it is today, I may command 25% more salary than I would have when I'm competing against you two folks for the same job. Well, now some employers may say that's more than we've ever paid. Well, you're going to pay me what I'm asking for, or you're going to have to find someone else. So money could be an issue. Like I said, I've interviewed over the last 5 weeks, probably 100 people. Maybe 10 of them I found, in my opinion, to be capable of moving on to a technical interview. The other 90 folks just maybe they stopped learning. Maybe they got comfortable where they were at, right? So I'm a SQL 2016 master. Okay, well, 2022 is on the horizon. Have you at least looked at that? And if the answer is no, I'm not going to consider moving you forward, whether or not you're interested in moving forward. So
Right.
I don't know. I guess it's a multivariant problem with a complex answer, right?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a bunch of what you said. I also think the whole COVID thing really warp speeded a lot of these companies who were just kind of sitting there and they not really investing internally into IT systems and things of that nature. Then COVID came along and they forced them to. And now you don't have a choice. Like now you have to, right? You have to send people home. And I think that also by sending people home, you have to shift your infrastructure to allow people to work from home. Right. And I
For
think
sure.
a lot of companies were really caught with their pants
Yeah,
down and now they like now budgets were blown out of the water because you needed this and that, XYZ and all this stuff. So when I was at Retikill, when the whole pandemic hit, we shifted. I mean, we have 10,000 employees. We probably shifted maybe three quarters of them home, and my department had a relatively quote unquote easy part of it, right? We just had to buy more ASA licensing, right, to bump that number up. But like some of the desk side engineering guys, they were spitting out laptops hundreds by the day because people needed to transfer from their laptops home, and people that didn't have laptops before or Chromebooks or whatever, they needed them. They were working way harder than we were, but like that, it takes money, it takes planning, it takes everybody on the same page. And I don't think a lot of companies were really ready for the whole, okay, you're literally forced to work from home and now you have to have infrastructure to support that. Well, you have infrastructure to support that. Do you have the people to support that? Because not everyone
It's the
runs
skill
in that
set, yeah.
lane,
The skill
right?
set, yeah,
So, and
yeah.
I feel like the biggest shortages now are in the cloud computing space, right? So, Mike, in your realm, right? The Azures, the AWS, the GCPs of the world, and some of the smaller ones too, like Alibaba, and I think Rackspace has their own version of the cloud, things of that nature. But the big three, right? AWS, Azure, and GCP. I also think, Dean, you and I have talked about this a billion times. Cybersecurity is a massive shortage as well, trying to get people to fill those roles, especially the federal government. They're trying
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
fill roles like you wouldn't believe. There's just not enough people out there. And the other one I found interesting too that I did a little digging on was guys that do like data storage. Like that's a shortage as well. Trying to get those guys in the right places and how they store data, and that goes back to the cybersecurity, right? Is it data stored in motion, or is it in motion at rest, things of that nature? So there's a massive shortage there as well. And I think a lot of these companies were slow to adapt to newer technologies, a la the cloud, and that flexibility that the cloud gives you. But then if you were finding that diamond in the rough and they were ready to make that move, I feel like there were some folks out there or some jobs out there that were really throwing some big money, whether that be sign-on bonuses or, Mike, like you said, an extra week of vacation or something to sweeten that pot to really attract the top tier talent. And that's what happened to me, right? I just threw it out there and they came at me with a really good offer, a really good perks and things of that nature, and I took it. And whether I'm top tier talent or not, I guess that remains to be seen. But I really think, and Mike, this goes back to when we worked at the place together, that they just had a lot of customers that just didn't have the infrastructure or didn't want to invest or didn't want to do that piece of it. And now I feel like they were really caught with their pants down because they had to. So now they're spending way more money than they ever dreamed they would because they're forced to, rather than
Yeah, because
gradually.
and plus
Yeah,
infrastructure's like gone up by like at
correct.
least 5 to 20%, and then there's a shortage, so
Nope.
you
Yeah.
can't even buy like
Nope.
your ASAs, and so
Oh,
it's just terrible. It's now you want to scale,
yep.
and then there's nothing to scale with, and
Yep.
then there's a people shortage. So a lot of these companies just can't actually move now or have the staff back at home because they can't get the right equipment, can't get the people to like do that, to
Yeah,
build that infrastructure out. So
it is.
it's an interesting time because look, a lot of companies wanted you at the office. They didn't really believe in the remote sort of way of working, the solutions and stuff like that. They asked them what a VPN is, and they're
Yeah.
like, "What are you talking about?" I bet now after
Hell
COVID, everyone
yeah.
knows what a VPN is.
Heck yeah.
That is
I
true.
agree. And I think I think the other part of that too is I think, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm just wishful thinking here, but there has to be some sort of emphasis with the lack of top tier talent out there, that wherever that top tier talent is, their current employees, they have to do a better job of keeping said top tier talent, or else
Yeah.
it's just this massive struggle of back and forth, and people want to feel needed. I think businesses need a better handle on keeping top tier talent, because then, I mean, ultimately, hiring new people is just basically costing the company money in the long run, because you're constantly training, you're constantly onboarding,
Yeah.
and then they're there for 2 years because you treat them like dog shit, and the projects never end or whatever, and then you're hired and it starts all over again. So and that next person coming in may or may not be top tier talent, and you may say, "Oh, we should have kept a hold of Dean. We should have kept a hold of Pat because he was really good." And now this new guy is. You may go through 4 or 5 guys until you find the next Pat or Dean or Mike.
Well, part of the problem is you have to get management, most of whom are not technical people, out of the mindset that IT is strictly a cost
Bingo.
center. And once you have management that realizes without IT people, without the infrastructure, without our expertise, your business grinds to a halt unless you're willing to go back to paper and pencil.
Yeah.
Un-
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
absolutely.
there are few managers in my experience who follow that or even believe in that.
Yeah, that's interesting take.
That's That's why you have to turn off the internet pipe now and then. Just turn up internet pipe. Just let them feel it. Just like, if I went away,
This is what you're
back to
dealing
pen
with.
and paper.
Yeah.
Just let them feel that burn just now and then.
Yeah, I feel like that too. I feel like I've had a bunch of managers that just they're not technical at all, or if they were technical 20 years ago and stuff that doesn't exist anymore. But
I was still riding out the old days,
like,
the glory
come
days.
on. And I tell you what, a lot of managers I've had, they can't manage people well because Mike, like you said, they have the Mike Kelly mindset. They expect people to do things the way they do things, and if they don't, then you start butting heads. That's just a fact. So get used to that. If you're coming into this field, it just is what it is. You just try to do your best and get through the day and try to piss as less people off as you can. But Dean's right. You got to shut that pipe off every now and then just to show them.
Yeah, shut. Let them know your wife. If this goes down,
That's it. No, but it is a balance, right? It is a balance because so the other side of the coin is the business makes money to pay our salaries, and then we in turn keep the business going on the back end and make their jobs A, more streamlined, B, up to date, C, C, D, E, and F, X, Y, and Z. So it is a twofold thing, but I think obviously a lot of people are on the side of the business as far as, well, yeah, we're going to side with the business every time because they're paying our paychecks. But, there has to be some sort of balance of, hey, look, you got to keep your people happy because in the long run, it's more expensive just for you guys to be a carousel of people through here. It's just more expensive, and you have to develop them. You have to, turn them into top tier talent. And then once they're top tier talent, make sure that they're, fed and happy and they're not jumping ship on you. So I feel like that's a bigger piece of this puzzle as well, that a lot of people aren't keeping their top tier talent happy and they're looking elsewise. And Mike, to go back to what you said, you're looking at people's resumes. If they've been out of place 15 years, like that's a red flag too. It just is what it is. It's like you're stuck in cement shoes at that point. And are you ready to put your running shoes on again? Most people aren't.
Yep. But then a lot of, especially older managers, they look at people who switch jobs every 3 to 5 years like, why do you job hop so much? You both know that it's considered a faux pas to trash talk. Why did I leave this job after 3 years? Well, let me tell you about this, brother. And you read them the riot act, why I left. That's going to sour your relationship with a potential future employer. So I coming from a tech background myself, and as someone who has switched jobs regularly in about a 5-year window or so, I could regale you for days. Why did I leave job X? Why did I leave job Y? And it'll get the three of us laughing. But these are things I would never say to a potential hiring manager at a new place.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I had a manager who told me to leave jobs every 2 to 3 years, and I think it's solid advice. I haven't done it in my current job, but after 2 to 3 years, he said to leave because after that, you've learned everything you need to know. So if you're not moving up or if you're not moving in the same organization or going somewhere else, after 2 to 3 years, you're saturated, especially if consider yourself high talent. You know what I mean? Like 2-3 years to learn everything you need to know, move on, do something else. And usually that's how you grow your salary. So you never really get it staying in the same place. So I really, advocate for, if you're starting out, just get your head down, learn what you can, and learn those processes and the great things what made that company successful, and take that to your new place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I just started a place and it's been really good to me. So, but yeah, I've job hopped 2-3 years max, but I've had other recruiter friends tell me as well, Mike, that they start looking at, okay, he's jumping every 2 or 3 years. That's becoming the normal, right? If you're there 5, 6, 10 years, they start to look at you. You're like, is he really going to be a good fit? Blah, blah, blah. That sort of thing.
Unless you work for a company that's developing you and promoting you and giving you more responsibilities, in which case, if you're talking to that recruiter, that's what you say, right? Hey, it's normal for you to job hop every 3 years. You've been with company XYZ for 8. What's going on? Well, they sent me to boot camps. They paid for my certifications. They let me finish my degree. Oh, okay. Right. Now that justifies you staying in a role. Or staying with a company if you are getting more responsibility. That's a big deal to me. Can I be promoted in this role? Should I be promoted in this role? And if the answer is yes, I should be, but you're not. Okay, let me update my resume and we'll start looking.
Yeah, that's fair reasons to go too. No one can argue with that. You know what I mean? Like, if you've done the hard work on the back end and then you're not getting the advancement or the furtherment after maybe a new cert or maybe a degree or something you've done to just improve yourself for an organization, and you're not getting the recognition. Like, no one can argue with
Yeah,
that, really, as far as
this
I'm
is an
concerned.
interesting tip I'll tell people out there as well. I've fallen into this trap in past lives and whatnot, and it's an interesting take because I heard this from my father, who is also in IT. A shout out to him if he listens. I was struggling with leaving. I've struggled with leaving a couple places that I've been at. I was fighting inside my head, like, do I want to leave? Do I want to stick it out another year? Blah 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 blah. This and that. And then he said, "Look," he said over dinner one night, he said, "Look," he said, "that company had to make cuts for whatever reason. They would not feel bad or think twice about cutting you if you were on the chopping block." And he said, "If you found another opportunity out there that fits your needs, whether it's pay, whether it's respect, whether it's whatever," he said, "and it fits," he said, "go." He said, "At the end of the day, it's a business, and the business is a two-way street." So he said, "They don't feel bad about cutting you. You shouldn't feel bad about leaving them for a better opportunity." And that's the cold hard truth.
Yeah, it's business.
It just is
Sure.
what it is. Yeah,
It's very
it just is what it
transactional.
is.
Yeah.
So
No
yeah,
need to get
exactly. And
emotions
that's
involved.
just that's my own stupidity. But yes, it's happened. Yes.
And I think we probably all struggled with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all have.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the more you can take your emotions out of it and think of it more
The cleaner
business
it
and
is.
transactional,
Yeah.
the better it is for you.
I agree with that.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so we are right around an hour, maybe a little over. So yeah, I think we're gonna get out of your hair for this one. Mike, this has been really good. So thanks for coming on and hanging out and talking a little bit.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
the invite. Now, was that a personal jab at me, Pat? You're going to get out of my hair?
Yes, that was a personal jab. For those of you who can't see, we don't
Yeah.
do video, but Mike is bald. So yes, that was a shot at getting out of his quote unquote hair. So thanks, Mike, for hanging out with us for a little bit. This is really good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Yeah, it's been really insightful. And I'm not an AD or a server guy, so this has really been some great insight for me in terms of, learning what you do and what you AD guys do and stuff
Mostly
like that.
we
Because
lay in the corner and cry.
that's a mystery.
That's awesome. Yeah, so thanks, Mike, for hanging out for a little bit and chatting with us. So, guys, we're gonna get out of your hair. Like I said, we try to keep it right around an hour so you can get on with your day. But we appreciate you listening as always. So make sure you check out our website, soyouwannabeanit.com, where you can subscribe to the show on your favorite platform, whether that's iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, they're all there. Or just a plain RSS feed. We have it there as well, so you'll never miss a show. If you could throw us a rating on there on iTunes as well, that would be awesome. That fools with the algorithms and makes us look better in Apple's eyes, so that certainly can't hurt. Or you simply tell a friend, right? So you say, hey, we caught these cool guys on the podcast and they're really insightful, and give them a listen. So I think word of mouth works just as well these days as some of the social stuff does. So be sure to tell all your friends out there and share on social media, right? So our Twitter and Instagram and Facebook links are all in the show notes with links. And our Discord server, if you guys want to join that to get a little closer to us, to Dean and I, the invite is in the show notes there as well. And we've also set up a Patreon account if you want to throw a couple bucks at us, because this stuff is not, to put content out like this consistently is not free. So if you want to support the show a little bit, head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/so you want to be in IT. And there's 2 levels there, if you will. So it's nothing too crazy, but every little bit helps. So we appreciate if you donate to us. And Mike, do you have a social you want to throw out there, your LinkedIn or whatever, people can get a hold of you?
I use LinkedIn. So it's M Kelly, KELEY 25.
There you go.
So you'll see my shiny bald head up in the top left
There you
corner.
go. Look at that. I love it.
Beautiful.
I love it. Yeah. So thanks everybody. We're gonna get out of your hair, and we'll see you next week, Dean.
All right. Yep. See you next week. Thanks guys for tuning in. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.